Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find out more about Office Hours, how to join, and how to be part of it at officehours.global. Today, basically the way it runs is every day, 7 days a week. We have basically open questions that are 7 to 8 o'clock in the morning. So basically any question you have around media or virtual production. Second hour is something we've decided to spend a little bit more time on. Now on Monday, or today, we're going to spend a little more time on just the on actual questions. So you can ask a lot of questions today. Tomorrow, we're going to talk about Elk Live. Jeffrey Powers brought them in, and they do remote interaction, remote recording, back and forth, live remote jamming. So we're kind of interested to see what that looks like. So we're gonna have them in on Tuesday. Wednesday, Ruthless Reviews, a warning to all the members here that we're going to do Ruthless Reviews on Wednesday. And then on Thursday, we're going to follow Ruthless Reviews by Show Your Setup. So basically, we'll talk about what's working and not working about people's setup. Then we'll go to, then we'll actually go in and have people really break down what they're using, what's working, what's not working. And then on Friday, our own Laura Thompson is going to talk about accessibility. Why is it important and how to make it work, and what are the tools that we need to do that? I'm really excited to have her here on Friday. And then Saturday, of course, is the long day. We have education at 8. We've got MetaHumans at 10. Nick did last week. I'm doing this week. So I will be talking about actually creating MetaHumans. So that'll be something that I'll be hanging out with all of you to do. And then at noon, once again, we have Damyanti's cooking. So there's a link with Damyanti Gajjar's recipes and so on and so forth in the email that you get. It's on the webpage, and so you can download the recipe and what to buy and how to get ready and so on and so forth. Now, last week was amazing, or yesterday or 2 days ago was amazing, but it was just Damyanti and Shannon. You're welcome to come and cook with them. It's really a great experience. They're quite happy to do it without you. So the two of them will just keep cooking. I'm planning to be cooking there with you as well. But yeah, that's something that we have to, if you want to come, you're welcome. That's all I'm saying. All right, let's jump into the first question.
Comes to us from Rupert McRae in Dallas, Texas. And Rupert says, what computer-based DMX controller software and hardware interfaces can the panel recommend? Options for Windows and Mac, if you would, for basic and complex lighting.
Richard?
Yeah, for a Mac, I would recommend a mixture between QLab and EntTech's ODE Mark II. So this pops it on, the ODE pops onto the network, puts it onto ArtNet, and then QLab connects in via that IP address, and then it can give it a really kind of granular control, really simple or really quite in-depth control. That's what we use on a daily basis.
Go ahead, Alan.
Yeah, I can recommend CamSys, their Magic Q software, and Avalights, both of which are very well established in sort of live events industry.
Carl?
So I'm going to go to the top of the range. So it's going to be Obsidian with Onyx. So this is hardware, console, software, but PC only. So that's the only thing with this one. It's Windows only.
You go ahead, Jonas.
One thing that you can use if you want to go into the MR Lightning direction is .2 on PC. They have a free version of that, and it's technically discontinued, but still works really good.
Next question.
Comes from Mike Emmett in Melbourne, Australia, and he says the USB output from my ATEM Mini Extreme has such crushed blacks and intense colors. It's like there's a LUT applied, especially in comparison to the HDMI output. Is there a way to change this?
Go ahead, Stuart, and then Carl.
One thing to double check before going too far is make sure you haven't applied a LUT to the HDMI output instead, and you're getting a flat look out. Make sure that both outputs are clear of any of that before you go into any problem solving. And that's where Carl will pick up that answer for this.
Go ahead, Carl.
Yeah, so essentially, like I found that like with this image here, this is actually coming out of the computer, coming into the ATEM and going through. So it actually, you won't tell on this image, but the blacks do get crushed. There are ways of fixing that. So I found if you're putting a computer into the back of an ATEM, go to display color profile in your settings, not 709. Avoid 2020 going into here because the ATEM doesn't understand 2020. So avoid that. But yeah, I find that P3 or DCI, that particular profile works a little bit better as far as lifting the blacks back to where you expect them to be. But that's on the input device, that's on the input side. So your computer will have to do it, or your camera. Now, cameras sometimes don't have that. So yes, if you want it to look, if you want to match the HDMI output to the USB output, then yes. But there are other things you can do on the computer side, so that can lift it up anyway.
Jonas?
There are two points where it comes in. And the in point from a PC, especially on a Mac, they can have a false color profile that crushes the black, but also how they implemented a USB output for the webcam driver crushes the blacks. What you can do is use VMix, because VMix has a mode where it detects that and fixes it for you, and then use the virtual input of VMix into Zoom.
Aaron?
Just a note that the way that the webcam works is it converts everything to motion JPEG. So you're comparing an uncompressed HDMI output to motion JPEG, which is always going to look different. So I wouldn't compare the two, but it's not really all that useful. I mean, you can do it, but but everything else they said is right. It's just so you know, like the compression is actually pretty hard. So
yeah, and one thing that you can do is you can shade your cameras to adjust for. So I do that a lot, where I just shade my cameras for the output that I'm going into when I have that opportunity. And you can do the same thing with your computer. So you can set a profile that is your ATEM profile, look at the round trip from the computer on a monitor or whatever, and adjust how your Mac is sending out or PC is sending out the video file, and then save that as a profile so that you can adjust for it. But it is something that is going to happen, as Aaron said, as part of the process. Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, there's actually a website that will do this for LUTs, and I think it's Doug Johnson, actually friend of the show, Doug Johnson. It has lutmath.com, and you basically give it one LUT, and you can transform or conform one to another.
Next question.
Richard Lavery in Belfast in the UK says, what stops an audience from joining in with the event's chat or questions, and what have panelists done to encourage interaction?
Go ahead, Guy.
I think seeing what you're going to do with the question, if you're inclusive and you're really just being kind and really making that person feel like they're contributing to the show and driving the show, then I think that's going to make other people see that there's an example there of, somebody who's putting together something that is to support the audience and not just to bash them down and raise them up in some way. So yeah, I think feeling inclusive.
Good, Stuart.
If you've got a commentary team that is not talking to the audience that's online, the people who are watching basically they'll go and watch something else. That whole two-way thing is what keeps viewers interested. I used stuff that we've discussed here at a recent live stream. For commentators who had never done this sort of thing before, got them talking to the audience, got them to ask the audience simple things like, hey, shout out where you are, where you're coming in from. And suddenly the audience numbers plateaued and started to climb again because people were suddenly a lot more interested and involved in what they were watching, knowing it was a two-way communication.
Go ahead, John.
This is a good question. There's a paper written called 1990, which is a generalization that 1% are creators, 9% engage, and then the other 90% are basically lurkers. It's an interesting piece.
Go ahead, Jonas.
For a press conference that we did, we started with not as many questions, but we saw as soon as we mentioned them by name, and especially not butchered their question, it was overwhelming how many questions flew in, because there was no other time where you could ask the question that directly. And at the end, we had more questions than we ever could have imagined, and it really helps it picking up. We planted 2 questions, and those 2 questions were read piece by piece, and then people got it that their questions actually matter.
Yeah, Bill.
I think there's a double-edged sword here too. I think if you're creating content that is incredibly compelling and the pace is right and the audience is fully engaged, sometimes I've noticed they don't have time to disengage and form a question and post a question. It doesn't always happen that way, but it can be a really good show can be tough to get questions into. On the other hand, if one part of the genius, I think, of Alex's format here is that there will be questions that you're really engaged with. But there will also be other questions that you're not as fully engaged with, which gives you time to think about what you'd like to ask from the one before, and it gives you a little rumination time to frame that question well so that you can put out an intelligent question.
There are very, very, very few shows that I watch that are so compelling that I can't think of other things while I'm watching them. It happens. You're right, but wow, it's like an Avengers movie. Yeah, go ahead, Rupert.
Yeah, so like in demo type presentations and things like that, I've noticed two distinct ways people go about it. They start the presentation saying that they're going to leave room for questions at the end, and that just seems like such a long slog. But when they, do it section by section maybe and ask for questions after each section, leaving windows, I find that just for me, I find that much more engaging and enjoyable rather than seeing this 7-minute window at the end of a 1-hour presentation where they then say, "Oh, we've got 150 questions."
Right? Yeah. Let's go.
I put a link into Toastmasters has what are called icebreakers, and those are just questions that you can just open up with that everyone has an opinion about. So it makes it easy for people to participate.
Yeah, I think that there's a couple things for me. I mean, I've been doing some version of this for a little while, and number one is remember that you're losing people. So generally, if you do something for 5 or 6 minutes straight on a live stream, people start doing something else. It's 5 or 6 minutes. That's it. And if you put up slides, it's 60 to 90 seconds. Like that, those are the real numbers. So if you put up a slide, if you start doing a slide deck in 60 to 90 seconds, people aren't listening to you anymore. Now, if you're lucky, you have a chat and they're talking about things or whatever, but they're not listening to you. They're off doing something else with you off, and every once in a while they look over. That does not lead to questions. Like when you have half of their mind, that doesn't. The other thing is that another point has been made, like when you read their name, when you carefully read their name, carefully read their location, and carefully read their question as it was written, they have a tendency to feel acknowledged. And the other thing that we use is we use things where we literally have someone pull up an iPad and go, "Hey, we're going through the questions," and they actually, I know that seems like a little theater. We had a director that did it, and we didn't realize. He's like, "I got my iPad here. Here's the questions," and he kept on saying that. And every time he said it, we could see a spike in the question velocity. Like you just see this little thing where everyone's, "Oh yeah, I'm gonna ask a question now." And so definitely telling people that. Another thing is, so what you don't want is paper. Paper tells the audience that you have written them down. Like that they're not there, and not showing anything. Having them look at something is actually pretty important. And then repetition. This is what we did. Like people are much better now at asking questions than they were before. Questions beget questions, but also people getting into that flow of that they're going to do that. I think is something that you want to let people know you should always do it. And then finally giving people content beforehand so that they can. Here's the interesting thing. This gets back close to John's point about the 1990. Is that what's interesting is that 90% of it, like people say, well, not everyone's going to watch the films if we put the films out before the show. They want to force you to sit there, but they're not forcing you to do anything. You're putting them into a little corner in the side and going and checking your email. You're just boring them. So the thing is that what you want to do is give them the videos, let them watch the videos, and then the next day, 2 days, 3 days after those videos have been submitted, now you just have a conversation. You don't have to do any presentation. Hey, we watched the video. You know what? Only 15% of the people are going to watch those videos. Like that's the reality of what's going to happen. So they aren't going to all see it. But the conversation, almost everyone will get almost all of your points. And especially if you're good at it and you know what points you want to cover in an answer, they'll get all your points, but they'll get them in the context of a Q&A as opposed to being driven into the ground with a slide deck, or a presentation or anything else. So you're way better off. At this point, I don't think I would ever go back to like doing a long presentation. I can see it here, even when our second hour, our Saturday sessions and stuff like that. too long of even a demo from someone who's really, really good. And I can see everybody's eyes, you know, everyone getting sleepy eyes and looking around, obviously doing something else. And, you know, like it is even in our own community, when we try to do something that is longer than about 5 or 6 minutes, you know, people just go off and start doing something else because there's so many other things to do on your computer, you know, and so you're really competing with that, and you have to think about that as you design your content. It's an entirely different way of thinking. But in the other side of it is, I have a hard time. I can't jump into after hours very often when I'm working, because I can't stop. I can't stop being engaged. Like, it's the biggest problem I have with office hours and after hours is that when it turns on, my brain rattles and I just go, oh. So I come in, but when I come in, I know I'm not going to do anything useful until I leave. I haven't been able to. I've been trying to do this thing where I watch it in the background, and I find inevitably I'm thinking about it more than whatever I was doing. So I have to keep it in little spots. You know, it's very interesting. But that smart people conversing is very compelling. Next question.
Guy Cochran's in next from Seattle, and he has an interesting question. If you were to go to NAB, what booth, product, or person would you most anticipate seeing?
Aaron?
I don't go to shows to see booths, products, or people. I go to see people. I go to meet people, and the booths and stuff are fine, but I really want to talk to folks and just meet them and make new relationships.
Stuart, then John, then Carl.
Mine's pretty self-interested. Abe apt, so I can ask for fresh firmware for the Cylon.
John.
I'm looking forward to seeing Chris and Doug here at my pool. How about that?
Very good. Carl.
So I would be going to lens manufacturers and asking, where is my ENG full servo micro four thirds lens?
Yeah, I go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, I think those who have gone to NAB long enough, you end up with a group of friends from all over the world that you end up only seeing, you know, right around NAB. That's a lot of the real draw for me, that, and, you know, making new friends. I'm still not sure if I'm going to go this year. I've got the press credential, but man, Delta.
Go ahead, Mickey.
Probably first try to meet up with the Frame.io folks and say thank you, because they've helped a lot in the past year and a half with workflows, generally speaking. And I would also meet up with the Avid folks, because they've done a lot of pushes in terms of immersive mixing, and also in terms of DSP processing in the past year. And also I would try to bug Blackmagic into letting us know more about when they're gonna make Fairlight a bit more workable in the large scale professionals field.
Yeah. Chris?
I just want to officially welcome Mickey back to the panel.
Yay! We got Mickey back.
Guys.
I was excited to see you the other day. I was like, oh, Mickey is back. So anyway, so it's good to have you back, Mickey.
Thank you. Nice to be back as well.
Next question.
It comes from Jasmine Lee in Singapore. Jasmine says, how would one bring together external speakers for a panel discussion, then stream the event over an organization's intranet that is not connected to the internet?
It's me. I've been now that I'm doing it. Now that I've been a guest on my own show, on not my show, our show, I sit there and I raise my hand. Go ahead, Jonas.
I would say, I'm not sure. No, Zoom wouldn't work without internet. You probably need a self-deployed Nginx RTMP instance or some form of peer-to-peer sharing, like who's the one that just got acquired by Teams? So maybe Teams has a solution for that.
Go ahead, Stuart.
I would cheat for the intranet part. The internet is Zoom that we all use, but the intranet part is difficult because programs like OBS and VMix are not easy to stream over an intranet, because that's not what they're designed to do. So I would actually take the HDMI out of a computer into an RTSP box, and I would set it up to multicast and give everybody the website or the IP address of that box to plug into VLC, and they could pull it up on their own device.
Rupert?
Yeah, pretty much what Stuart said. If you can have a machine that's going Zoom one way and intranet the other, then encode it with using a VLC, and then have people connect to it with VLC or whatever media player they have access to.
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, a question I would like to throw to Jasmine, and this might help us answer this more accurately, is would this be a one-off event, or would this be an installation that would be used repeatedly? Because that would dictate how much budget would be put into it, etc.
Yeah, go ahead, Aaron.
So I've done this before. Well, intranet being kind of vague, but you need, what I did it with was an Nginx server with RTMP, streamed to the RTMP server, had a web page, people with video.js on it, and made it pretty, and people could just hit play, and it was there, and that worked great. And we actually ended up load balancing it because it was meant for 5,000 people or something. So I had it on 3 servers, I think. But it wasn't very hard, and it worked great, and it was cheap.
Jonas?
One of the issues that I run into with that type of deployment is if their backbone of all the networking gear is just overloaded. That was one issue we had at one location. And if you need something like Zoom, and let's say everything should be contained in the intranet and you have no outside access, you could use a self-hosted Video Ninja instance and do it in VMix or OBS that way, because Video Ninja now can be 100% self-hosted.
Mickey?
Yeah, definitely. If you're going to go with some sort of IP distribution, which most likely would, you want to look for something that does multicast from the transmitter. You don't want to send individual streams, like hundreds or thousands, or however many connections you need to do. You might also want to look at, in terms of hardware solutions, look at Bluestream, BLU stream for some encoding and decoding hardware.
Yeah, we've done it with multicast with up to about 30,000 people through Wi-Fi, as well as through their wired connections. And that's just using Wowza, I think, on 6 servers with an origin. That was it was a little bit of a thinking to get it started, but it worked pretty well as far as being completely disconnected from the internet. If what you're talking about is being private and not going out to the outside internet, but still having some internet access, there are tools like Collective, and also Facebook's Workplace will stream only over the intranet, and it will do peer-to-peer. So it's not putting pressure on the both Collective and Facebook's Workplace in the enterprise version will allow you to have people, it'll go peer-to-peer where not hitting your ingest into the buildings. And so those are 2 that are pretty useful that way. Jonas?
Vimeo also has a peer-to-peer CDN option that you can enable.
Yeah, so those are great ways, because you really have to pay attention to what's going in and out in that case, and it still stays fairly private. I don't know about Vimeo's very much. It does take some setup. Multicast, the problem that you have in a company environment is that the IT folks hate it. So they, it's a security nightmare for them, and they don't want to do it. So it's a lot of work on their end to fortify it for a show. So you have to know that you will have to have you'll have to buy some folks some cake, beer, maybe whiskey. Go ahead, Aaron.
The last thing is Akamai, Limelight, Fastly. All these people also have authenticated streams, so you can limit it to users that are from your domain, that kind of thing.
Yeah, we've done streams where we stream it in, and we actually put an Akamai node in the company.
Yeah.
So then and you're literally, it comes into the Akamai. It's literally like having an edge server built into the company. So that's possible as well. Next question.
Comes to us from Rupert McRae and Dallas, and here on the panel he says NAB Show will be using the COVID Trace mobile app for COVID contact tracing. Is anyone familiar with this app, and what other contact tracing apps is the panel seeing in the on-site show and production spaces?
Go ahead, Jonas.
I'm not. I don't know that exact one, but in Germany we have an open source COVID tracing app that is being paid by the government, which has to be is really successful. We did have some issues with other apps, one mainly called Luca, where the government spent a lot of money and now nobody uses it because the connection to the health system is not really there. But there are our COVID app also lets you generate a QR code so you can check into a place, but it also tracks it with the Android and Apple APIs to proximity track.
Bill?
Not contract pacing per se, but California is rolling out pretty robustly their vaccine verification system. I only mention that because you mentioned the live space, and there are now restaurants and bars that have live music that are saying you can only enter if you have the app. You just hold up your phone, they scan it, and that confirms with the state that you've been vaccinated fully.
Next question.
Next question comes from David Brady in New York. Can the panel recommend an affordable lighting with remote control for a small studio? Currently using the Neewer NL480, but I'm hoping to reduce the footprint.
Go ahead, Carl.
So there's 3 that I'll show up. So these are the Godox. These are DMX. So these ones are pretty powerful. You can see by their size, they're quite large. So they're actually entering into this stream now, Godox. If you want to go a little bit cheaper, but still have the DMX, then the TL60. So these will be very bright. These are 2 foot high, and you can actually arrange them in a star pattern to give you an enormous flat light. And then if you want to go even cheaper, still with control, the TL30s, but no DMX.
It turns out so the other thing is that I'm using right now in my hotel room, I'm using these Hues, although I think I'm testing it. I have an Aperture on its way to my house. So when I get home, I'm going to try the Aperture version of that, but that's just the Bluetooth connected to it. And we're really thinking seriously about converting a bunch of what we do to something that I can control that way. That what we want to do is be able to control it from the Mac Mini that we send with our kit, having all the lights be able to talk to it. So we're playing with a lot of that. Go ahead, Jason.
Wait, just so I'm clear, you're in a hotel room and you switched out the hotel lights with
they
Hues.
Okay, they were intolerable.
Awesome.
They were intolerable. Like it was like really, really bright, and and they were blowing out, and I couldn't correct for it, and so
They were awful.
They were awful. The first day it was awful, and so I ordered these while I was here, and they work quite nicely. And it's actually quite nice when I go to bed. It's like I just go up to my iPhone and go turn off, and then all the lights in the hotel room turn off. And it only takes a minute to take the lights apart and put them together. So it's a lot of times when I'm traveling, to be fair, is I'm researching our remote kit. So I have all the pieces that our remote kit uses, and I'm going, oh, I like this, or I don't like that, or it's the only time I really interact with it enough. So that's why we're thinking of taking these lights and sending them with our remote kit, sending 4 of those in like a little box so that we can have our remote folks throw these into their fixtures in the room that they're in, so that in addition to having some key lighting on them, we can fix. That's the biggest problem we have, are windows and bad lighting from our guests, and so if we can replace their bulbs with something else, we think it will improve the experience for everybody. Yeah, go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, talk about audience participation. Do you mind if I launch a quick poll that says, what color should Alex's Hue lights be, and let the audience pick the color?
Sure, launch the poll.
Warm.
Did that work? Did that work? I think I hit it right. In Mukana?
Did people see
what color should it? Yeah,
you'll know because people will be voting. So you can vote on what color.
The show.
Later, someone can. We'll come back to it in a minute or two. Another question, and I'll make the color whatever you want. Whatever you want, we'll make the color. What we should do is have it where people are voting and they have to constantly vote to keep it at that color, and then we just drive it directly. So
it automatically changes.
Yeah,
we split our votes for left light and right light.
Yeah, exactly.
I want to see the flames shooting out the top like you did before.
Exactly. Next question.
Rupert, no, I'm sorry. It's Keith Harrison up here in London. And he says, when will the Conscious Cuisine book by Damyanti Gajjar be available in the DVE store? The big questions. Will it ship to the UK?
Now we're getting into the real questions for today. Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, they hit the dock today. We just got them released from customs on Friday. So they're there and shipping to the UK. They should be available. I don't think we're going to ship USPS because we had some tracking issues going around the world, even though that is the cheapest way, but they're guaranteed to get there via UPS, and we'll have tracking. The other thing that I was noticing, it's a course. Like when I looked at it, I was like, this is $40, but I'm like, wait, where do you get course materials for $40 with a live instructor? So to me, I was like, it's way worth $40, especially as a gift to other people. So I'm excited to get a couple and give them as gifts and say follow along, because it's supporting the community and it's cool.
What I really like about it is that it is no nonsense. It's not like this, I'm going to teach you how to make something crazy. It's just really good food that is actually really good for you. Like, it's just a nice, like, you can open something up and just go, okay, I'm going to try that. And I've tried a couple of them and just really, and now I'm excited about being able to actually cook with the author. So having the book and being able to cook with the author, I think, is something that's pretty revolutionary. Aaron?
Yeah, Saturday's show was fabulous, and I would highly recommend anybody just even watch. I mean, but cook along would be great too. Yeah. Guy, can you put a link to that in the Mukana where people can buy it?
Yep, and it's also the link. Oh, and Guy, if you send me that link, I'll put it into the email that goes out every day too.
Yep. You're gonna sell them out.
Yep. Next question.
Rupert McRae in Dallas is back in. This again, the current NAB exhibitor floor plan shows a significant amount of empty booths. This may also be a rising number. At what level of exhibitor non-attendance does it become unworthwhile attending NAB oneself?
Carl?
I have a feeling that this NAB is going to be the Black Magic show with special guests, because, Black Magic have taken up the largest area, and, in comparison how big their actual booth is compared to others. So it's interesting to see who else comes, but it looks like a lot of the focus in the press, and that's kind of how it works. The press just go to the biggest thing, and it looks like Blackmagic may take over the press cycle for anybody.
I think the problem is, as that booth gets bigger and everyone else's gets smaller, there's some companies that just like, they don't want to be seen. Like, it's really devastating for a company like Sony or Grass Valley or whatever to have a booth that's a quarter the size of Blackmagic's. It's better not to be there than to have a small booth. That's the real challenge. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, I think this is going to be an interesting thing. I feel sorry for the people who put on NAB. I mean, it's a big show. It's been wonderful. I have a lot of friends. I'm going to hate not seeing them this year, but this resurgence of Delta has just made me as an individual say, no, I'm going to pass on it till next time. Otherwise, I would have been here and I would have looked forward to it.
I will say, though, I mean, I do feel bad for them, but, we had data that showed that the fall was going to be bad in March. Like we were looking at that data, like everyone was saying, oh, we're not, like, I have tons of corporate clients that aren't scheduling anything until next spring. And because they had the data, and so the thing is that NAB, I get, is desperate to move forward and they just want to get back as fast as they can. But this is what we're seeing constantly is people being impatient and just wanting to go back to it rather than just being with the way it's going to be, which is that it's going to take some time to sort itself out. And NAB is paying the price for that. Or they may be paying the price. Next question.
Jonas Nattel of Reuling in Germany, and here in the panel, where are all the Swift devs hiding? It seems like everybody is always searching for some.
Go ahead, Aaron.
They have jobs, and now is not when they want to change jobs or do freelance gigs.
Go ahead.
I really think that's the case.
I will say that the Swift developer component of WWDC was huge and had as much energy as anything I saw there. So I think we're on the leading edge of a lot of programmers diving into that language and understanding how it operates. And that over the course of the next few years, more and more software is going to be written using that. So I think it's just going to take some time.
Jonas?
An interesting thing that I noticed by having a job listing is I got so many applications by people that I specifically asked for somebody that is able to produce a Mac OS app. And I got so many people that are doing iOS apps and telling me, yeah, iOS apps can now run on Mac OS. It's the same, which I found really interesting that comes over now.
Yeah. Jason?
Yeah, as a developer, I could tell you, just because one can work on the other does not mean developing for the two are the same. It straight up isn't.
Next question.
This one comes from JHB in New York. Good morning. What budget and mid-price wireless mic systems and mics would you recommend for a startup community theater company? Thanks.
Go ahead, Carl.
So I would probably suggest this as like a mid-budget. So these are not 2.4. The next step up from these Godox would actually be the T-Bone. So you'll have to get them out of Germany. but they will do an 8-channel system at around a 600 megahertz for around $2,000, or probably about $1,500 US, $2,000 Australian.
Yeah, go ahead, Mickey.
At the lowest end I would recommend would be the Sennheiser G4, either the 100 series or the 300 series. If you could spend a bit more for something live, I wouldn't go any lower.
Yeah, go ahead, Richard.
Yeah, G4s is what I would recommend. And top tip, Guy has a nice setup video on the G4s on the YouTube.
Very good. Courtney?
And if you're going to go with one of the cheaper versions, try and make sure you're going to get one with diversity receivers, so that has 2 antennas or 2 receivers. Because if the transmitter person is moving around on a stage, you're going to get multipath cancellation, and only the upper middle class diversity receivers are going to eliminate that multipath issue.
Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, +1 on the Sennheiser G4, I guess G3, G4. I don't want to get into the difference. I also really like the AVX. These are a little bit more expensive. It's just a matter of, what you mean by low budget.
Bill?
Yeah, I have owned the AVX as well. But here's the thing, in theater, it's a little different in that you constantly got people putting them on and taking them off every day, plus scene changes and things like that. If you go with some of the cheaper equipment, I think it's going to fail really quickly. I think you really have to spend some money if you want to wirelessly mic a theater where they're in that heavy use, constantly, makeup on the elements, everything. That's a tough gig.
Yeah. Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, for a theater environment, I would suggest going with a receiver system that is rack mounted, that you can connect to an antenna combiner, so that you don't have to have a dozen fins for 12 microphones. You just need to put a pair of fins for diversity reception. And also for live, I would steer away from the AVX because that has 19 milliseconds of latency, which is havoc for performing live.
Aaron?
I would suggest finding a good local reseller and doing a bake-off in your environment and getting them to bring in a bunch of things and try them out. If you can't do that, then at least figure out a way to do an RF survey of your place and make sure that the frequencies that you're looking at buying are available to you, so that you can make sure you don't buy something and it doesn't work, or you get police scanners or something on your
and also remember that when you have a lower cost receiver, it doesn't have to be in the back of the room. like you don't have to put the receiver in the back of the room. One of the first things that I do when I have a less expensive receiver is just try to close the distance between the receiver and the transmitter. And you can use wires, for the rest of it. I see a lot of houses of worship are notorious for this, is they put all the receivers way in the back, of a really large space. And then they have breakup and so on. And the first thing that you do is you take the receiver and you put it in the podium. You just and then you run a wire from it, and then at that point everything suddenly works, and it's like magic, because we just got them really close. So next question. Oh, go ahead, Guy. What were we saying?
I was just gonna say the results from the poll are in. Looks like it's
purple.
16 for blue.
Purple?
And purple wins.
27 purple. Hold on. There we go. All right, go ahead, Bill, while I make it purple. There we go.
I'm just gonna add real quick to the last question. The person asking the question is based in New York, and New York is really known for noisy RF environments. So I agree with Aaron. Talk to a nearby dealer and have them test out the venue for what works there.
Next question.
Howard Gregg in Wellington, New Zealand is up next. And Howard says, anyone had success getting OBS to chunk recordings to set intervals, like split files into 60-minute recordings? Can't find much online about that topic.
Yeah, go ahead, Jonas.
There are 2 ways how you can achieve that. One is doing API calls after an hour, which basically stops and then starts the record again. The issue with that is that stopping an 1 hour record might take 1 to 2 minutes, depending on how long you have recorded. What I would actually do is use FFmpeg and run a little script that can split it into 60 minutes, because you can do that without transcoding with FFmpeg and the MKV files, and you actually can transmute them to MP4, so it's all in one go.
Good, Jason, real quick.
Yeah, +1 on what he said. That's exactly and the only way I've ever managed to get it to work stably.
Next question.
Vic Hernandez in Springfield, Missouri is up next with what is the best camera positioning, eye level or slightly above?
Go ahead, Carl.
So you want your camera to be level with the ground, and you want use your tripod or the column on your tripod to make sure the camera is giving you a correct headroom. So so there's three things you need to do. You want to make sure your camera's level. That makes all the lines in your background up down. If you have a background that doesn't add up down, we can tell if the camera's pointing down or pointing up. Look up your nose or coming down funny. So directly level. Use a column on your tripod to get it to the correct height for your seating position, or you can use your seat, of course, to go up and down, and then your zoom to get the correct framing. So there's the three things you have to do to get the camera set up.
Go ahead, Sky.
Well, again, I'd love to hear Roscoe's from the film school aspect of it, because what we're doing is having a conversation. So my vote is always that we have an eye level so that we're talking to each other. The other concept is if you put it lower, that means I'm an authority looking down at you. If you put it below, I'm submissive and I'm looking up at you. So there's the psychological concept.
You go ahead, Roscoe.
Yeah, in narrative, you always want the eye line to start with going perfectly level across the screen. So if I have a set of characters' eyes here and a set of character eyes here, I want that line to always be level. This person may actually be taller than that person, but I still want the lines on the screen to be level. After that, then you start going to artistic around the shoulder and other effects, but always you want it to be the eye level of the other character in narrative.
Stuart?
Just a rule of thumb for the height. Not only apply rule of thirds to the height of things in the frame, but also to the height of the subject for the height of the camera off the ground. That way it's very little tilt up and down from horizontal for the rule of thirds in the framing itself.
Go, Jason.
Yeah, first rule of photography is you never shoot people from below unless you're Alfred Hitchcock. The rule of thirds, for those who don't know it, you basically tic-tac-toe the frame, and you want your eyes in general to be at the top line of the dividing it into thirds. And I would say the head should be right at around there to minimize the tilt.
Yeah, and one of the things that when we shot in film, a lot of times we were kind of putting them right at most cameras were sitting at someone's shoulder level. You know, that's kind of where the just a little below the actors makes all the actors look a little taller than they are. But when I do zoom or I have someone going in, I always have the camera usually about 4 to 6 inches higher than the person. It's because it pulls their chin up and it makes them look nicer. So you know, when unless you're a model or an act or a well-known actor, looking down is not your best look. So usually we pull their head up just a little bit by moving the camera up just a little. If we have them addressing an audience from a screen on the stage, we actually put the camera a little below them, back to that shoulder height, and then we put their monitor a little below that, and that makes it look like they're looking right at the audience. It's kind of Wizard of Ozzy kind of look. So those are some of the things that we think about. Next question.
Next question comes from Stuart Fairweather, Melbourne, Australia, and here on the panel right now. The Roadkill Nights event from Woodward Avenue on Saturday turned into a bloodbath of negative feedback with buffering to all viewers. So there were upload side issues. What basic rules can we share to save office hours viewers from experiencing this level of fail?
Go ahead, Aaron.
Get more internet. All the internets.
What was it buffering from people who are? Yeah, go ahead, Stuart. Can you describe the scene?
It was brutal. The comment section.
What was the symptoms of the stream?
Okay. Firstly, anybody watching was lucky if they got over 480p.
Mm-hmm.
And literally it would keep repeatedly buffering, so you would never end up watching the actual live stream. They just weren't, or they just did not have enough pipe. They were ascending both to YouTube and the Motor Trend On Demand app, which is a region blocked app. So anybody outside of the United States pretty much can't get it.
And was
anyway.
YouTube buffering as well?
Everybody watching YouTube was saying the same thing, which was it would buffer, then it would play, then it would buffer.
So it's not a CDN problem. It was just a streaming problem from their space.
Yeah, it looked like they just didn't budget enough bandwidth, or they were using a 4G connection in a place where there was thousands of people with 4G
Yeah, I mean,
devices.
So what we've seen
I actually can't show you the live stream because checking their YouTube channel, it's not there anymore.
Right. Well,
that's how bad it was.
Yeah. The most typical reason that happens is people bring live views that they've tested really heavily at the venue until everybody showed up. So they, and so what happens is they're like, well, this worked an hour ago. Yeah, there wasn't 30,000 people there an hour ago or 10,000 people there an hour ago. It really only takes about, in most locations, 2,000 people will saturate the cell to a point where you can't stream, and so the live view won't help you at that point. Go ahead, Jonas.
Have a backup and test. Not only people are a problem. In Germany, we get sometimes internet over the cable. And we have seen as soon as people start watching TV, because it's so over-provisioned, somebody tests in the morning and tells me it's totally fine. And then in the evening, we have no bandwidth. Mm-hmm. So test and always have a backup. I now also have always a holding slide with a backup stream in AWS ready to ingest if everything locally would fail. I can just ingest that.
Go ahead, Aaron.
Or big events like this where you're going to know where you're streaming, get fiber run to the place and just take the money. Like, I mean, it's not,
hard.
or satellite or something. So you can,
it takes, usually what happens is it takes an event like this to have people understand that they're going to have to spend real money on something, like they're just like, well, there's something available. And everyone, almost every vendor, almost every client we've worked with has to have something where, and what I do if you're working with me, you'll get a long email like, hey, we're really worried about the bandwidth, blah, 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 blah. That email, I don't push it too hard other than to say, hey, I think that there's a problem. And I say it in writing. And then when it happens, we come back to it and then we return to that email like that happened a month before where I said this is going to be a problem. And we come back to it and we make other plans for something better. Anything that you think a lot of people are going to want should have at least two ways. Every stream should have 2 ways out. And, for the most high quality, high profile streams we have 4 ways out. And they're all 4 diverse paths with 4 different ways of doing it. So cellular, fiber, satellite, terrestrial, that type of thing. Next question.
Ted Claudio in the Philippines in Quezon City says, I'm using ATEM Extreme ISO. Any recommended cheaper alternatives to VMix to display, overlay, interactive online data sources like answers asked in Google Forms or cells entered in Google Sheets or Excel in a live stream?
Carl?
Stream Deck. So Stream Deck is probably the one that can bring in all these different things and things like Google Forms. That'll be cheaper than VMix. And it's relatively easy to use.
Yeah, go ahead, Stuart.
Okay, so there are Google Forms that are online. So you open them in Chrome or in a browser. Use the browser input of OBS. That's probably your cheapest option.
Jason?
John Barker's Here to Record Graphics is absolutely perfect for this. It's what it's done from day one, and it works natively in Google Sheets.
Yeah, there you go. Next question. The other one, the only other thing I'll say is that Here to Record Graphics and Mix Effect Pro are both worth having all of those files. So what and both both John and Adam are both in office hours so there's a lot of support for it. But Mix Effect Pro and Here to Record just changes the way your ATEM works. And so if you have an ATEM, those are like must-haves to add to what you're doing. Next question.
David Brady in New York says, I have an old Firewire DV adapter I need to bring into the modern world. What are the chances this adapter change will work? It's a Firewire 400 into a Firewire 800 into a Thunderbolt 2 into a Thunderbolt 3 adapter chain.
Good, Carl.
Definitely will work. So this is it. Use the Apple ones as far as the Thunderbolts. And you can pretty much use anything. You've probably got a 400 to 800, but do use the Apple ones if you're coming into the Apple ecosystem. They'll work every time.
Bill and then Stuart, but really quick. I think Carl hit it.
He did. He hit it out of the ballpark because Apple was part of the core of the Thunderbolt consortium. They do everything to standard, and it really should just work fine.
You go, Stuart, real quick.
Yes, I've got the Thunderbolt 2 to Thunderbolt 3 adapter from Apple, and it works really well. But you've got Firewire 400 to Firewire 800 to Thunderbolt 2 to Thunderbolt. Every point where you've got to plug it in is another potential point of failure. So instead, I would go onto somewhere like Amazon, and I would either get a PCIe Firewire card or an express port Firewire card for a laptop, and just go with
Stuart, the
one
drivers
cable.
won't work for those. The drivers won't work for those in Big Sur.
Okay, well, PC.
This is the
Do it
only
on a
way you can
PC.
do it from ancient equipment to modern equipment. This is the only way you can do it.
Carl's right. The 1394 spec is no longer part of Mac OS. You don't want to deal with that. Just go Thunderbolt.
We don't know that they're on Mac OS. It just says DV Firewire adapter, so I assume it's PC.
There you go. Next question.
Okay, John Baker is back from Malmo, Sweden, and he says, has anyone used HyperShow on the panel for using HyperDeck?
HyperSlow. I think HyperSlow or HyperShow.
Oh, HyperSlow. Thank
HyperSlow.
you. On the panel for using HyperDecks as sport replay devices specifically.
Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, I have. It's been a couple years, and I got burned by them pretty badly. So I think that the newer versions are much more stable than the one that I used. So yeah, I think it's worth a shot.
Next question.
Gerald Grieve in Richmond, presumably Virginia, says, when I joined this morning, I got a screen inviting me to something called Zoom Community. Is this new? Is this useful?
Rupert?
Yeah, so it is new. It kind of crept out last week or maybe the week before. It's literally that, an online community forum type platform. It is new, so it appears to have some pre-populated discussions in there, maybe by some beta testers or even some Zoom staff, I'm not sure, but I suspect they're going to talk about it more in Zoomtopia, and they're just trying to warm it up a little bit.
Go ahead, Aaron.
No, when Rupert started, I didn't need to say anything.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up next, and he says the FCC mentioned that high schools and colleges have operated low-power TV stations in the U.S. Wouldn't most high schools have a struggle affording a pro-level broadcast facility, not to mention finding and retaining qualified staff and talent?
Go ahead, Carl.
So what the FCC gave them was the ability to use a transmitter, not to set up a studio. So it's up to the local education board if they actually want to set up a small studio in the school. But they have the right, and that right's been taken away. So the NTSC analog has actually been going away. So this is actually disappearing now. But yeah.
Good, Bill.
Yeah, this tended to be back in the day of broadcast when high schools, that's what they're saying, low power transmitter. Most of this is moving to digital. It's really not that relevant anymore. There may be some legacy equipment in old schools, but I don't think that's what the new people are doing, even at a high school and college level. They'll be using digital.
Go ahead, Aaron.
Lots of high schools. My old high school has a great TV studio. I mean, that's really common. To teach kids about TV, and they may not be completely up to date, but they work fine. I don't know. The FCC part. Yeah, they got rid of those licenses. So,
Courtney.
And a lot of schools and a lot of television stations, when they go to update their studios, will donate their older equipment to the high school or college, and so that's where a lot of these schools get equipment for free.
Go ahead, Stuart.
Yep. Anything with arts, both in the US and here in Australia, tends to take a backseat to sports. So I would talk to the sports department and say, hey, do you guys need anyone to film our games, and pitch it that way and see if they can include it in their budget rather than try it through the arts budget.
Yeah, there's a lot more, and there's also excitement about kids, for kids to shoot football games that they want to do. To get started, though, I mean, at this point, the investment is less than $10,000 to get you could put together a really good newscast or whatever the kids would want to do there without very much money. I know a teacher that I keep on trying to get around. I just have to talk to him a little bit beforehand, but he raised $1.5 million. They've got a huge studio that's all built out, for a high school, and so it's but it took years of proving that he was worth investing in. That's the key, is that it's not something you can just write some on paper. It takes years of proving yourself as a teacher before you're going to get people to trust you to give you a bunch of money. Go ahead, Rupert.
We also had some discussion recently about low power radio stations. And I think that when we were talking about that, it became clear that on these lower power things, there's less requirement to have, RF engineers on staff and all that stuff. There's different sets of requirements.
But I think that, and then we've also seen a lot of schools use some of their COVID money to build little studios because it helps with distance learning. So having lots of students and teachers knowing how to do video has become something that's more important and may become extremely important this fall. Again, next question.
Douglas Carmichael says, Rupert mentioned the NAB show using contact tracing apps. For the sake of liability and risk management, shouldn't contact tracing be handled by the public health authorities at the jurisdiction at issue?
Bill, real quick.
Yeah, probably, but things like in Las Vegas, where it's known to be the convention town, a lot of that permitting is kind of political. And in the back thing, if you're a major player, you can get things done. I mean, they built that little Hyperloop tunnel between the thing underneath the strip, and it wasn't, I don't think, as regulatory a hassle as it would have been in other jurisdictions, because they're all about conventions in Las Vegas, and that kind of tends to grease the wheels and move things along that might not another place.
Yeah, Richard?
In the UK, the government's put emphasis on venues to keep a record of who attends so that they can come to you to get details and then follow on from there. So it might be an aspect of that.
I also think that NAB wants to have the people who come feel safe. Like, hey, we're doing everything we can to make this all work. I think they're just trying to make it a safe environment. Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, I think on top of what you mentioned, Alex, I'm sure the NAB also wants to do a CYA. Like, they don't want this to be called, the big super spreader event. So they want to contain things as much as they can, at least have a little bit of control.
Right. Go, Jason.
I mean, I'm reminded a couple years ago of the NAB when it happened right after a mass shooting event, and they had security guards and dogs, and everybody aside from press, which was bizarre because we were the only ones who were allowed to have bags in there. Everyone had to go through a checkpoint. I think they're checking boxes at this point, and they just, it seems like theater to me.
Yeah. Next question.
Ross Brand in New York City says, I'm looking at Mimo Live. I noticed there is a special add-on you need to buy to use an ATEM Mini. Would I need that if I do all my switching using the hardware on the ATEM Mini?
Go ahead, Carl.
No. So essentially what Mimo Live, the add-on or the plugin, is essentially the free ATEM software. They've just got their own version of it. So someone else just, because the ATEM can be, you can write code to control it. So someone has actually just written code that so it allows you to use the Mimo Live software via the ATEM software, which is free anyway. So if you're all in the ATEM, just use the ATEM and use the software that comes with it.
Good guy.
Yeah, you don't have to have it, but it is pretty powerful if you want to use an iPad for making buttons. If you're doing the same show all the time, where it's super powerful is creating those buttons that now you got a touch screen and you can just hit, like, bring up this lower third, boom. And then for like somebody who's just helping out a volunteer, it's super helpful to make it like idiot proof, where they just have 6 buttons and it's just press that one, then that one, then that one. We have a couple videos on our site that go into detail, but it is about $100, I believe, for that add-on. So it isn't free, but it is pretty powerful. And I'll put those links in the chat.
Next question.
John Barker in Malmo, Sweden. Continuing the subject of sports replay, who's used VMix replay and what was your experience? Pros, cons, and so forth.
Go ahead, Stuart.
VMix replay. Firstly, don't do it on the same PC you're streaming from. It records in their own version of MPEG-4, so it's putting a lot more processing load. Put it on a separate machine, send NDI across to your main machine rather than doing the replay on the same machine, and put in a Quadro-based graphics card so that you've got multiple NVENC encoder streams available for the recording, so it stays within hardware rather than try to do it in the CPU. It will work, but you're better off spreading the load across multiple systems rather than try to do it all on one system. I believe the new version or the current version of VMix has gone from 4 streams recorded to 8 streams recorded. The one downside I've really hated was it would, while it was recording 4 streams of video on the version I was using, it would only record audio from one source. So you had to use your main mix. So you couldn't do replay of a separate incident happening behind the scenes.
Another one that you might want to look at just as a reference point is Softron's MRelay is also another really, really good replay system for the Mac. and I am going to need to jump off to production. So we're handing this off. Courtney is taking over and running with the rest of the show. So I will see you all tomorrow morning, and have a great afternoon. Reminder, we will start at 9 o'clock with after hours promptly. So manage the time accordingly. All right. See everybody.
Bye-bye, Alex. Okay, next question.
Okay, we're zipping to Alan Davis in Norwich in the UK, who is on the panel today. And Alan asks, what Windows-based motion graphics software is there for non-Adobe folk?
Jonas.
I am using Resolve for that exact purpose. This is a patch that I did that is just some basic lower thirds. It looks intimidating at first, but it's really cool, and it's free.
Okay, next question.
Abraham in San Diego asks, I need help. I currently bought the base model Mac Mini M1 and tried using it for my church. I have my main monitor and also connected to the Blackmagic Studio switcher so I can show videos. It reads both monitors, but the one on the switcher is completely black. What help can he get?
All right, Jason, and then Mickey.
Yeah, I can almost certainly tell you what your deal is here. With the exception of the Mac Minis and the very highest TV Studio 4K Pro, it's not going to generalize your frame rate and your resolution. So what you need to do is go in and switch your resolution and your frame rate on your switcher, or vice versa, to exactly or whatever the switcher is expecting. That's why you're getting a black screen.
And Mickey, did he cover it, or?
Yeah, exactly what Jason said.
Jonas.
I had a weird issue like that took me 3 weeks to find out, and at the end you just need to plug it into the monitor directly at the first boot, because there seems to be some HDCP problem on the first boot, and then it should show up on the ATEM if you have an ATEM Mini.
Okay, next question.
Looks like it's coming from Ike Potter in Hanover, Germany. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name. Oh, Ike Potter. There we go. Would it be possible to have a reference list of Mukana's / commands with explanations in the Mukana channel on Office Hour Discord? Would it make it easier? It would make it easier to follow up on ongoing improvements.
All right, Carl.
Ike, you might want to hold on to this question until Alex comes back for another show. So maybe ask this question tomorrow. It's a perfect Alex question.
Jonas, do you have an answer?
Also, there's a /? Command that will give you exactly that, and then you can use /? with a command to find out what it is. And I think we should not put it in Mukana in Discord. So Mukana has always the correct command for that version that you're on, because sometimes you might not be on the latest one. So we have one single source of truth.
Okay, next question.
Rupert McRae in Dallas, Texas asks, is there a LUT generator mobile app that can look at a physical color chart and a chart shown from a camera on a monitor and then automatically generate a LUT from those?
Jason?
Aside from DaVinci Resolve, no. I mean, DaVinci Resolve does this beautifully. I've never heard of a mobile app that does this.
And Carl?
It's not a mobile app, but you guys will know it. So it's going to be the data color spirit. No, sorry, the spider print. So with data color, there's two things. You've got your two spiders. The print one will look at any chart. They'll say the print one, this is actually to calibrate a printer. But you don't have to calibrate a printer. You can actually have an actual chart, an actual color chart, and calibrate a monitor to that exact color chart. So your color chart on the monitor will look exactly like the real world color chart. If you want to do a camera, you take the image from the camera and put it on the screen, and then use the data color spider normal version for the monitors and set that profile to match this one. It's a pretty straightforward process. I've seen a lot of people actually do it on set. It's so you can actually match a color chart to a camera to a monitor, and a real life color chart to your eyes, to a monitor with a color chart on it, to a camera showing the color chart, and all three will match. But you will need this one, and you'll just need the normal spider as well.
All right, thanks, Carl. Next question, Bill.
Ross Brand in New York City says, does anyone use a browser-based video editor, either for short clips or larger projects? If yes, which options do you feel are best?
Jonas.
2 things. I have used a browser-based editor, which is kind of cheating because it uses the remote access possibilities from AWS. So I had Resolve in a browser. Other thing that I use with my volunteers to get it out really fast is Canvas. their video editor is good or good enough. It gets you what you need, and it's browser-based.
All right, next question.
Coming from Noah Sargent in Fullerton, California. And Noah asks, what options are there for KVM, keyboard, video, and monitor, remote monitoring for computers?
Mickey?
Geffen has a lot of options for these. Like they literally have dozens of different combinations of boxes to do remote monitoring for when you have a machine in a machine room and you need to hook up displays and input devices in the studio. Their solutions are recommended by folks at Avid, at Dolby. So they make good stuff. Geffen.
All right, Jonas.
Another really cheap solution is using the NDI tools with NDI scan convert on the PCs, and then using Studio Monitor because it passes through KVM.
Okay, Sky.
Evertz used to do this exact same thing, but it will require a lot of cables and a lot of copper. But they've also done the Ethernet version of that, so you can run Cat5 back and forth.
And Stuart?
VME and the laptop or computer you're sitting in front of to just dial into the remote one and control it from there.
All right. Next question.
Noah Sargent in Fullerton, California asks, why haven't lens producers created more servo zoom lenses for EF or Micro Four Thirds?
Carl, go ahead.
So Canon has, of course. So the EF is definitely covered. Canon have some from $3,000 US up to $70,000 US, full servo EF lenses. Micro Four Thirds, there are none. So you are right, with the exception of the Panasonic, which you could call servo lenses, but they're essentially just powered zoom lenses. But you're right. So the Micro Four Thirds is lacking, but EF definitely has that covered. It took them a few years, but they now have a full range at a full price range as well.
All right, Jason, then Stuart, and then Bill.
My answer is that prior to Blackmagic, nobody cared about this, and lenses tend to take years and years and years to develop, exactly the right switch of elements to go into a lens, and plus also it's not an extremely high power set. So I mean, they have a lot of constraints to work with, and my guess is we'll see more, but who knows?
Okay, Stuart.
Okay, the question was, why haven't lens producers? Not all the other answers, but why haven't? So we drifted off the question. The answer is because it's expensive and it's hard to do. They're parfocal lenses, and the amount of research and money you've got to pour into it compared to making a lens for a DSLR that's very focal is huge. It's expensive and it's difficult. That's the why.
Bill?
Also understand where this all came from. Once upon a time, still cameras and video cameras were totally different beasts. And until the Canon came out with the 5D Mark II and people started using it for something that it wasn't actually originally intended for. I mean, it had this Digic processor in it that could barely get over the hump of doing video, and people looked at it and went, wow, that's a great picture from this non-video camera. And so people started flooding into that, and that changed the industry. And then suddenly everybody wanted a still camera that shot video. You still have gazillions of lenses in EF that were there from all the dawn of time that were great for making videos suddenly. And then the cinema lenses on a DSLR form factor started to become a thing, and it just hasn't been the weight of history producing them. So they're two different things. In Micro Four Thirds, the same thing. That came in as a later format and just blew up because it's less expensive and smaller. Everybody wants smaller cameras.
And Mickey, did you have something to add to that? Or?
Yeah, just to build on what Stuart and Bill mentioned, servo lenses have been traditionally mostly used in broadcast situations, wherein the mounts are usually 2/3 mounts. The usage of Micro Four Thirds mounts in video didn't come until like much later on. I think one of the initial lower end cameras that started that usage of Micro Four Thirds would be probably be the Panasonic AF100, which sort of played on top of the whole DSLR shallow depth of field fad. So yeah, I think it's just the market isn't as large. That would be my thought.
Okay, Jason.
Stuart's answer was really good, and there was a lot packed into there. Perifocal lenses are designed, and I might get this backwards, but effectively, if you have a camera lens, it needs to be sharp for precisely 1/320th of a second, or whatever. So it's designed to be tack sharp for just that moment, whereas video lenses are designed to transition into and out of and be a moving, living thing, which makes them much more complicated.
And Stuart has a rebuttal to that.
It's close, but actually what Jason was saying there is an absolutely very important point. DSLR lenses, they're built to hit an autofocus point and do it quickly. Whereas a video lens, generally you are focusing manually on these sorts of lenses, and it will take longer to get there. But the difference between parfocal and varifocal is a parfocal lens stays in focus through the entire zoom range once you've focused it on a point. So generally an operator will snap in, focus, snap out, press record, and then slowly zoom into the shot that they wanted. Whereas a varifocal lens, the focus is different as at every point in the zoom.
Okay, and Guy.
Yeah, the 20-120 that I use from Fujinon is a PL mount. It's the Cabrio, and if you see some dock shooters shooting with Sony or some of the bigger like S35 cameras that are more above $5,000, so they'll rent that lens or they'll own that lens. But these guys are right. I mean, it's varifocal or parfocal, and being able to zoom all the way in, knowing not only is it going to be sharp when you get there, but also that it's going to be in the same spot, because you can have breathing, which the framing is not the same. So when you watch some of the marketing videos of the Fujinon MK Cine lenses, they have some great examples of it being off. So it's incredibly expensive to do this, and the market isn't that huge yet. And I think Blackmagic is trying to make it huge. So along with Panasonic with the GH5 and the GH3, I think a lot of people picked up a lot of that glass back then. So we'll see if this keeps on going and growing this market for MFT.
Back to you, Stuart.
Just one thing about Micro Four Thirds and Blackmagic. One thing Grant did mention in his demo was that they're doing the parfocal behavior in the camera, as in it's altering the focus as you zoom. That's AI level behavior inside the camera. It's fantastic, and it is going to make it accessible to a lot more people, rather than something like what I've got sitting behind me, which it was expensive when it came out.
Okay, I think we've killed this. Go on, Bill.
Theo Ziotos, looks like, is up next, and he asks, I am struggling with VMix and NDI feeds from Zoom Rooms and Teams. On Wirecast, it runs perfect. Each computer has a dedicated 2.5 gig NIC for NDI and Netgear 4214X.
Any takers? Anyone? Bueller? Sorry. Come back again another day with more panelists. Oh, wait, we got Prato.
I would hit up Leland Best in Discord. He's a VMix expert, and he uses predominantly NDI for everything.
And Jonas?
If maybe put a question in tomorrow again and tell us what your problems are, because with just you telling us you have problems could be a lot of things.
Jason and Guy?
Yeah, +1 on that. We were waiting for the question. That was the crickets thing. Yes, there are many ways that you can be confused about this, because it is by its very nature confusing.
Okay, Guy.
Yeah, I'm wondering if Wirecast is seeing it. There is some rendezvous stuff going on back there, and I'm just wondering, when I use VMix with NDI, I use a discovery server, and that cleaned up a lot. So basically, if you could turn off multicast and then get a discovery server, and it may sound complicated, but all it is go open up the SDK. There's an app in there called NDI Discovery Server, and then on the VMix machine, open up Remote Access Manager and point that Remote Access Manager at the discovery server via that IP, and that will clean that up. And then you might need to turn on IGMP snooping and turn off multicast, and then turn on MDNS.
All right, next question, Bill.
Douglas Carmichael's back in with, what has the panel's experience been with Parsec on a local network? I'd love to use it, or something similar, to have a PC for Unreal Engine development accessible from my Mac.
Jonas?
I tested Windows to Windows. It works.
Okay. Anybody else? No? All right. Next question.
Rick Coombs from Columbia, Tennessee. What is the best way to listen to office hours? It appears that Mukana mobile audio does not work. Bandwidth is an issue for Rick.
Carl.
So if you're watching along live, there are some Android and some iPhone apps that allow you to do audio only YouTube. So essentially you put in you just use that. It's essentially it's a YouTube front end and it just does audio only. And it'll just essentially give you the audio version of that video. So that's one way if you're doing it live. If you're not doing it live and bandwidth is a problem, you can just download the same said video from YouTube on these kind of apps as well to watch at your own leisure. Just, it'll take a little bit of time to download, but once they download, you can watch them in full quality.
And I'm sure Mickey's going to tell us about the monitoring in Mukana, huh?
Yeah, so that's something that I need to put a bit more time into, working with Taylor and TJ and JJ as well in terms of setting up, because we've, for the past year, we've been streaming out the Mukana audio through Shoutcast, and we've Alex has been wanting to transition that to an IceCast server. And it's just time has been an issue lately with that, but soon we'll get that up and running.
Okay, next question, Bill.
Yeah, come on, Mickey. What else have you had to do in the last month? Douglas Carmichael is up next with, when building a small studio at home, what measures should you take for resilience? Would a UPS be enough?
Carl?
A UPS will save you once, but once if you have like a lightning strike or something like that, then that's it. The UPS is out and the battery will run, but the actual surge protector in that UPS, that's gone. So you won't be able to use it again as far as a surge protector. You can use it as a battery, I guess. If you want to run for more than 20 minutes, essentially you want to run more than just saving all your documents and shutting stuff down, then maybe a Nomad. So 2 of these will be able to run a live stream for quite a long time.
All right, Jason?
All right, I'm going to go with the standard Mickey answer here. It depends. It depends on what you're talking about when you mean resilience. Whatever your studio needs in order to do its studio thing, whether that be power or infrastructure or whatever, you need more than one of those. Whatever your studio is putting out, whether it be the internet or a transmitter or whatever whatever its output is, you need more than one way out. So no, a UPS is not enough, but absolutely get one.
And we have Mickey here with his actual answer.
In terms of power, I always think of 3 things. First is surge protection to protect against like lightning strikes or anything that goes funky in the power lines. Surge protection, and then after that, power conditioning. Make sure especially if you're working with a lot of audio, which I believe Douglas is, you want to make sure the power coming in doesn't have a lot of line noise, because that could, of course, if depending on your wiring, that could get into your actual signals. And third would be, as you mentioned, UPS power backup. UPS if you only need a shorter running time, and generators if you need longer running time.
All right, Stuart?
Well, Mickey just stole the generator part of the answer, so I'll just say move to somewhere that doesn't have brownouts. Carl could probably vouch for a certain battery
Tesla Powerball
in the South Australian in the Australian outback.
All right, Bill?
Well, and we also tend to solve this based on the worst case scenarios. I believe, as Jason, I think, mentioned earlier, it depends on what you're trying to do. If you're producing content, and you're not going live 24/7, you don't have to power supply and everything as if you were doing live 24/7. I mean, you should have an excellent computer backup system in place that's robust and it's going to keep things as safe as possible with primary, secondary, and hopefully tertiary backup somewhere. But you may not need to spend the kind of money and the kind of time investing in a nothing can ever stop, unless you're working in an environment where you're making your money on nothing can ever stop with this signal. And most people today still aren't. If you are, God bless you, but right size it for what you're doing. And don't think just because the professionals here use these extreme measures, that means everybody has to do that.
All right, Aaron, and then Jonas.
UPSs are not protection from lightning. I think a lot of people say they are. I mean, you're sacrificing the UPS to lightning, but that's not what they're built for. So find something with gas discharge tubes to protect your whole house from lightning at the box. That's the best way to do it. I had my landlord put them in. They're a couple $100 and they'll save your bacon. And whole house surge protection, if you can do that as well at the same time. But those are the two big points that I wanted to make. Everything else is good.
Jonas?
Also, just having the device is not enough. You need a plan how to recover from any failure. So in IT, you often call it a disaster recovery plan. It's not only about not having something fail or having a failover, but also if something severe happens, how fast can you recover and test it? No backup is a backup if you don't test it regularly.
All right, Mickey.
Yeah, and it seems that we've mostly diverted to talking about power here. But just to stick to the topic, then I would also bear in mind that surges can not only pass through power lines, but also through any cable TV lines you may have coming in, plain old telephone lines. So if, say, you have a TV that's hooked up to your network and also hooked up to cable TV, if a lightning strike comes through the cable TV line, that may also transfer into your network through the Ethernet jack.
Okay, next question.
Moving on to Mickey's question. Mickey Macador from the Philippines says, Aaron and Alex mentioned setting up a local Akamai node. Is this hardware that comes from Akamai, or is this just a server package that one can deploy on their own hardware?
You have to talk to your Akamai rep to get it. Historically, it was a server that they put in and managed. I do believe now they have a sort of VM type thing that you can do as well. Well, they'll give you like an OVF and you could run it in a VM. But yeah, I mean, it's been a while since I did it. So
hopefully that answers your question, Mickey. Next question.
Thank you.
Danny Law in Malaysia said, would a Thunderbolt 4 media hub work on ports that are labeled as USB-C? And if it's stated as a USB-C media hub, would it work from a Thunderbolt 4 port?
Jason.
I'll put a link in Mukana for this one specifically, but I'll go by the questions one by one. Would a Thunderbolt 4 media hub work on ports that are labeled for USB-C? Exactly as written, the answer is no. And if it's stated as a USB-C media hub, would it work from a Thunderbolt 4 port? And the answer is absolutely. More info on the link.
Mickey?
And I think it's important also to add that USB-C is technically the actual physical connector. The protocol that runs through that connector is what usually varies. It could be USB 3.0, 3.1, Thunderbolt 3, Thunderbolt 4, but USB-C, when one says USB-C, that is the physical connector.
Aaron?
So if your machine has Thunderbolt 4, it also has USB 4. USB 4 is inclusive of Thunderbolt 4. They're part of the same thing. That doesn't mean that it will always work. But yeah, so in theory, what you're saying either way would work. But in practice, it's still a developing thing.
Bill?
To try and add a little more clarity or unclarity, remember that not just the connector and the protocol, but there's generations involved in this. And you'll find, Thunderbolt 3 Gen whatever, those gen numbers show an evolution of the standard, and the devices that are compatible with those generations fit with the new technology in there. So it pays to pay attention to the whole specification on devices to make sure you're not too many generations back to get full bandwidth or whatever.
All right, Jason, then Carl.
Yeah, Danny, I think what you're seeing very quickly is that this is a very hard question a lot of the time, because you've got protocols in cables, you have chips. For example, Thunderbolt cables actually have a chip, and Thunderbolt itself, although the cabling and the pinout is identical, actually uses USB-C's protocol as the timekeeper, basically as the master clock to do some of its fancier stuff. I thought I was being more succinct just by giving a link, but yeah, suffice it to say, this is tough, and the more we talk, it's probably not going to make it easier.
Carl, for the cleanup and the keynote presentation.
So I see there's actually 2 question marks in this question. The first answer to the first question is no. The answer to the second question is yes.
Okay. Next question.
Jonathan Swan is up next from Upper Marlboro, Maryland. Does anyone have any success with the proximity sharing features of Zoom rooms? And are there any tricks to making it work more consistently?
Jason.
Don't use Wi-Fi. Use Ethernet, and use Ethernet. Also headphones, depending upon how proximity your proximity is.
Aaron?
Proximity sharing features of Zoom rooms are based on audio. They're ultrasonic. And if your machine is capable of hearing them, then it will work fine. If it is not capable of hearing them, then it just won't work. So Macs tend to work because they can do ultrasonic transmission and reception. It's a bit of a hack. But when it works, it's great.
All right, Bill, next question.
Ted Claudio of Quezon City in the Philippines is up next with 4 low-budget live streams with Zoom Backstage. Do you recommend using a virtual graphical queuing board which contains information like remaining video running time, who's next to speak with the countdown, and so forth, as an alternative to using talkback audio for those things?
Jason.
I don't see the two as directly related. I can understand that there's some overlap there. I've seen a lot of really neat HTML5, things that have just been thrown together for this kind of a queue. But yeah, no, I don't see the two as directly, one or the other.
And Bill?
I've run shows where not everybody can see the timing of things, but since I've been an announcer for a long time, I've done the job of announcer at stage shows occasionally, where the director on comms is always coming to me saying, give me a time check so we know how much the running time is, how much time is left. It's a way to keep the crew involved and everybody on target and on time, even if everybody doesn't have a runtime display. So it can be useful for things like that.
All right. Next question.
Manolo Lorenzo in the UK says, using a Stream Deck, I've mapped Companion to send an input to preview in VMix. Is there a way to set this function up in Companion so that when I double tap the preview button in the Stream Deck, it cuts to program?
Well, there's a complex question for you. Anybody? Bueller? Perhaps when we have more Stream Deck aficionados here on the, you should ask your question again. All right, next question.
Next question is coming from our friend Hasmukh Gajjar in Cape Town, South Africa. As far as possible, I try and record in ProRes on 6K. Somehow, when I thought I set it on ProRes, the recording was actually in BRAW. What role does plugging an HDMI cable into 6K have as far as resolution is concerned?
All right, any of our 6K. Jason.
As far as I'm understanding your question, the answer is none whatsoever. If you simply plug in with using a cinema camera, it's just going to output in 1080, and that is completely resolution independent. And then Bill immediately puts his hands up, so I think I might be wrong about that.
No. It's not that you're wrong. I just wanted to say that one of the tricks of Blackmagic 6K cameras, mostly resolution is set on the touch screen panel on the right of them when you initialize them. And I've just found it easy when handling the camera, if I'm not careful, to tap on one of the resolution squares. It's kind of the downside to touch interfaces occasionally. So one thing that I would do before you ever push record on anything, just dump out of live video, go back to the menus and make sure things are set as you expect, because it's easy to accidentally change them. Courtney, you're muted.
You're muted.
I had to click it 5 times. I don't know why. Wow. All right, next question, Bill.
Ross, is it? No, it's JHB in New York. JHB says, I'm thinking about switching from the original ATEM Mini to the ATEM Extreme ISO. Will the XML files that I currently use to restore still work, or will I have to rebuild a new one completely?
Aaron, then Jason.
You will have to rebuild them, but what I would do is dump one out of the new one, and then paste in the stuff you want. Like if it's macros or config stuff, paste it in the the names of the things won't change. So you can paste that back in.
Jason?
Yeah, I completely understand his concern. It is a massive pain to get everything exactly the way that you want it. And of course, you don't want, or need absolutely everything from the original ATEM Mini. Yes, some things are renamed, but what I love about those XML files is they are extremely human readable, and more so than HTML. So if you just get a text editor, put one up, and then dump a clean file out of the Extreme ISO, you will very easily be able to copy, paste, and then, find and replace for whatever it is that you need, and it'll be a piece of cake.
Okay, next question, Bill.
Ross Brand in New York City up next with thoughts on Auphonic, AUPHONIC, which many podcasters use as the last step in their audio production workflow. They use it to set LUFs and so forth.
Anybody heard of Auphonic on the panel here? I guess. Okay, Jason, go ahead.
It's fine. I think people use Auphonic because they don't have the old, what's it called? The thing I use for meters that I'm blanking on. Yeah, it's okay. I mean, there are lots of less expensive. There are lots of easier things to do. I mean, you can do the same thing in Audition if you just set it for live. So I don't know. It really shouldn't be hyped up. It's just not that hard.
John Preto?
I would get a Mickey, Ross. That's what everybody needs in their life.
Indeed. All right, next question, Bill.
Virtual Mickey. That'd be a good program. Abraham in San Diego says, regarding M1 Mac Minis connected to the switcher and shows up black, should I change the frame rate on the switcher? And if so, could I do that on the switcher software, or would I do that on the software switcher, or manually on the switcher itself?
Jason and Mickey.
You'll do that in the ATEM app. My guess is that your cameras are running in, a 2997, and you need a straight 30p, 60p, something like that. You can't. I do not want to get into the finer points of how the two are kind of the same, and computers get confused about this. Suffice it to say, yes, you can absolutely play around with it on the output on the Mac Mini, and on the switcher, you can use just Command Spacebar, and I believe that's where you set your switcher data rate.
All right, Becky?
Yeah, I would keep the switcher at the resolution frame rate that you need to have it at downstream for the signal going downstream. I would do the change in resolution frame rate on the Mac Mini. And this is another +1 for always having a decimator on hand.
Okay, Carl.
So if you've got it connected to a Mac, 9 times out of 10 will be HDCP. So the Mac respect HDCP and ATEM Mini respect HDCP. So you have to make sure, one, you're going out at 1080. It can be nearly any frame rate because the ATEM Mini can switch to it. Just have it set to auto. But if you have Apple Music open, if you have anything open that has any HDCP content, even if you're not playing something, the HPCT flag will raise and it will just go to black.
Yes, we can thank AMPTP for that. Jason, go ahead.
Well, the issue that he was having was that he had something. He has one of the old non-ATEM minis. If I said ATEM Mini before, I'm sorry. It's actually one of the TV studio switchers that do not, re-quantize the frame rate. They don't stream or frame rate readjust. I think that's the issue. Yes, DHCP is a pain in the butt. I'm pretty sure that's not what's going on here.
And Carl?
So you'll need to look up Switch Res X. It allows you to set any resolution at any frame rate, including 30 and 2997.
Does that work on the M1?
M1,
yeah, I haven't tried it yet.
It should work on the M1 because it should work on Rosetta. It's a very basic thing. So what it's asking, it's just an API call. So that won't really be a problem. Essentially, the front end, it just works with the APIs, the same APIs. But Switch Res X is your best bet because you can go in there and you can set your resolution to your Mac to anything, like, 480 at, 30 frames a second if you want.
All right, next question, Bill.
Douglas Carmichael is up next with a Cisco CCNA and experience with Linux FreeBSD. Would it be possible to find remote first position? And he notes, I don't have any cloud experience, but I'm open to adding a basic cloud credential on top of those others.
Any one of you Linux hacks out there? FreeBSD? No. Oh, okay. Aaron's going to bite. Go ahead.
Sure. I mean, you can find a remote first position. You don't need a certificate, but yeah, I think it's all about your interview skills and your interpersonal skills and how you work with people. That is what I interview for when I hire people. Experience can be gained in lots of ways, and yeah, I don't want to get too philosophical, but it's definitely something you want to think about is just working on your interview skills, working on your interpersonal skills more than your technical skills. The technical skills are, something you can learn.
All right, I'll remind our producers we're running a little bit low on questions, so if you have anything, pop them into count on the questions right now. Go ahead, Bill. Let's answer the next one.
Next one comes from Douglas Carmichael, and he's asking, have you seen employers in the IT production industry be more open to remote first work these days, or is everyone rushing back to on-site work?
Go ahead, Jason.
I think everyone is running around like a chicken with their head cut off. I feel like it's this, that, no, this, never mind, no, that. So the answer is, I don't know what any one of our individual senses of this is going to be other than zigzag.
Bill?
I've seen both types of management being foisted upon the world, and it goes all the way up to the very top, because we've all read recently that even Apple is having trouble with this, determining when they're going to try to enforce any sort of, we want you to come into the office. We believe that the collaborative environment in person is important to the way we want to do our business, yet their workforce is pushing back pretty hard about that. And in the corporate practice that I do, I am seeing both types of organizations. Some organizations that just want to go back to the way it used to be. They like their corporate culture the way it was. They want to try to recreate it and get that teamwork in person going as fast as possible. Others have been very comfortable with trying to do things new. And what struck me in talking to the executives and the others that I know in those industries is how difficult these decisions are. It has to do with things like what are their contracts with real estate? I mean, I know a company that has 3 floors in a tall building, and they maybe need half of one for the number of people that have been working there. So that's a huge expense to undergo every month for something that's utterly not being used. So which way do they go? Do they get people back in it fast because they've got this long-term contract, or do they diversify and let everybody work from home and find a way to break their lease? These are complicated decisions. It's not going to be easy unraveling this story over the course of time, in my opinion.
And I'd like to say, Courtney, go ahead. Yes, that in the United States, and then we're going to come to you, Alan, it may depend. A lot of major corporations have to depend on CDC recommendations and guidelines because they're sworn to uphold them and can be sued if they're not following those guidelines. And it depends on the local guidelines for the area where that particular business office is located. So I know a lot of companies are planning to come back, but then if the variant spikes up in that neighborhood, they have to abandon those plans quickly because they have to adhere to the local requirements. And if they're not set up to have plexiglass between the cubicles, if they've got an open office setting, or if their HVAC isn't up to enough circulation for inside the building, just mask mandates may not do the trick. So I think they're still holding their cards close to the chest and keeping their options open. Go ahead, Alan.
You actually covered near enough everything I was going to say then about local things, but also you'll be surprised at the different industries that will be moving to things like remote. I work in the NHS in the UK, which is a large government medical organization, and it would be thought it'd be highly unlikely that we'd move into remote working. And actually, my job is now 100% remote, and half my team are now from all over the UK and Europe. So you'll be surprised at how organizations have been moving on, and even just the modern tech ones.
Are you still under lockdown in the UK right now, or is it pretty much open?
This week, well, no, we're not now. We are open, but it's very much. I mean, we're pretty much keeping in lockdown. I live in Norfolk, which is a holiday, on the edge of a holiday area where everybody's come up, and the hospital I work in is for the main tourist area around here, and the spike is one of the biggest in the UK up there. So I'm not going anywhere near my hospital.
All right, next question, Bill.
Noah Sargent in Fullerton, California is up next with, will USB 4 take over for HDMI on TVs? And he's saying, please say yes.
Jason.
I would say I wish, but not a chance, because USB 4 by its very nature does not support DHCP and is not backwards compatible in any easy and meaningful way to legacy devices like Blu-ray players.
Agree with you on the HDCP. Go ahead, Carl.
Yes and no. So yes, in the fact that DisplayPort 2.0, it's been delayed because of the chipset shortage, so no monitors are coming out until next year. So this technology is there. It's part of the USB 4 spec and the DisplayPort 2.0. We're currently at 1.2 at the moment for all displays. DisplayPort, of course, does support HDCP, but you're talking about a year away, and it's not going to be designed for HDMI applications, televisions. It's going to be designed for monitors, computer monitors. The reason why that is the case, because televisions are going up to 48 gigabits per second. There is no throughput. And we're not talking about a maximum theoretical of 48. Every television, every HDMI cable for TVs in the near future will run at minimum 48 gigabits per second. There is no cable on earth that can do that, but essentially not even SDI. So SDI, you need 4 cables to do that. One HDMI cable right now can do it into a Sony and Samsung television. It's the only cable that can do it. With DisplayPort, they're not designed to go into 8K 60 televisions. They're designed to go into 2.5K monitors. So 2.0 is, I think, maxes out at 4K 60 or maybe 5K. I think 5K 60, that's kind of where that DisplayPort is kind of max out, unless you do a dual channel, which, essentially just get twice the amount. But yes and no. So DisplayPort 2.0, look it up and look at the monitors that are coming out in 2022 now because they've been delayed. But as far as home entertainment stuff, HDMI will wipe the floor because it can do 48 gigabits per second every day.
All right. Alan, did you have anything to add to that, or did we cover that?
My only thing was think of what your nan and your brothers and sisters and neighbors, and they're not made for the technical people, generally the TV market, or if they are, it's a wild, it'll be a while till they make it down to sort of the consumer level of TVs.
And I might point out that USB-C is such a versatile port that it's so confusing about the number of things that people would try and plug into it that wouldn't work. I think they would probably try to avoid that as a consumer interface connection. All right, the next question, Bill.
Damyanti Gajjar, our friend in Cape Town, says, for my 6K Pro, I tried to switch my Sigma 12 to 24 f4 for the Sigma 18 to 35 f1.8. My supplier said that the 1835 is a cropped lens, and if lighting is not an issue, I should stick to the 24 or the 12 to 24. Why should I get the 18 to 35?
Stuart?
Firstly, your supplier is playing it safe because they're warning you that you might get vignetting, but the 6K is a Super 35 sensor. That is what the 1835 1.8 was designed to cover. So it will work if you choose it. The differences are, I think you'll find the 1224 is sharper. The 1835 was designed to be soft around the edges for the art look. The f1.8 makes the art lens faster, so you can get away with lower lighting and have less noise in your image. It's really a case of depends, like Mickey would say, what shoots or what suits the subject you're filming better.
Okay, Mickey, go ahead.
Yeah, I think it might be the other way around, wherein the 18 to 35 Sigma, it being an APS-C lens, would actually be an equivalent of 28 to 55. So it would come in tighter than what you would naturally expect from an 18 to 35. I exactly what Stuart mentioned, like go back to what you need the lens for. If you need, it looks like you're trying to acquire a wider angle lens. So if that is the case, then I would stick with the 12 to 24. F4 is not, it's not bad for a wide shot. Like you don't need to be at like 1.8 for every single frame. So yeah, throw more lights, more and better lights would do more to your image than another lens would.
Okay, Bill.
Yes, exactly what Mickey was just talking about. The light, to me, the difference between f1.8 and f4 is pretty substantial, but it depends on what I walked into. If the kitchen was bright and airy and there was all sorts of light coming in, I wouldn't be concerned at all about f4. If it was not, though, if you can't bring in a lot of extra light, you will find shadows starting to creep in around the exterior of your shot, and sometimes that makes things look muddy and or noisy. So faster lens will help for that, but it's one of those things you got to look at the shot and determine what's the most important thing to fix.
Okay, Carl, and then Jason.
All right, so Hasmuk returned the 12 to 24. It's a specialty lens for full frame cameras for landscape. It's an ultra wide angle lens. Like, I don't even own one. I own a 16, the widest thing I own full frame. The 18 to 35 is a perfect match for your camera. You have a camera that has a base ISO of 400. So really, aperture is only a design now. It's more for design, how much you want out of focus, because your base ISO is 400. So low light's not going to really be a problem. Unfortunately, I understand that they sold you the 12 to 24. It is a specialty lens for landscape and ultra wide, like architectural photography. It is no good for shooting people. I can't even shoot people at 16. It's just distorts too much, and I'll either have to put their head right in the center of the frame, because if I put it at the top of the bottom of the frame, it'll be distorted. So the 18 to 35 is perfect. It will give you, as Mickey said, around a 28, which is perfect for humans. I would never go wider than 24 when shooting a human, because once you do, you either distort their legs or their forehead. And so that it is a perfect lens, and you've already got the 24 to 70, which is great, because that gives you that medium to medium tele. That's really good, and it's a 2.8. The 1.8 means you can use it in lower light, but you never probably will, because you probably want the depth of focus with what you're shooting. But yeah, the 18 to 35, it will cover your sensor fully. The Sigma ones will cover easily, Super 35 sensor. The only thing that the 12 to 24 will give you is ultra wide on a full frame camera, which you don't need, and you don't have a full frame camera.
Okay, Jason, real quick, and then Sky.
Yeah, Hasmuk, my advice is very simple. Trust your eye. Just trust your eye. You know, you can take this and put it on a camera. You can take this and put it on exactly the same camera, and the use case is completely different. Trust your eye.
Okay, Sky, real quickly, we're running out of time.
And yes, the super wide angle gives you an effect. If you want that effect, it's not best on a human, but I used that looking straight down, and it gave, again, thank you, Mickey's in the room, it depends, but to give it that complete wide look shooting straight down, yes, we used it in the kitchen, but it was because we wanted a whole bunch of things in the shot. So if that's what you want, but you will get that spherical or that bokeh on the edges. So that's where use case, horses for courses.
All right, next question.
Douglas Carmichael, how do you ensure mono compatibility when mixing? Would time-based effects like reverb and chorus cause the greatest issues?
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, for me, it's not usually with reverb and effects that cause phase issues. It's usually when I have to play back multiple microphones or multiple, multi-mic, when I have multi-mic situations, like say two microphones on a guitar cabinet. That's when you get phase correlation issues. Unless of course it's like a scene, a narrative scene that's like swimming in effects and verb, like say, think of a dream sequence that's, just dripping wet with effects. How do I ensure mono compatibility? A lot of meters have phase correlation meters there that spit out a comma, what do you call it? Yeah, a
comma separates value.
Yeah, a spreadsheet that reports to you at which time codes there are issues in terms of phase correlation. And also, if it's a shorter piece, I would run through it, listen to it in mono as well.
All right, Jason and Carl.
Yeah, your mixer has almost certainly a mono output. You can also do it very easily from any sort of like, NLE recording thing. Also, if you want to do it really, really simple, mono some mix here is going to work very easily. As far as the effects are concerned, most choruses are not stereo choruses. Some are, but again, I think those effects are designed to not interfere with each other when played out in mono. At least that's been my experience. And reverb, basically the same thing.
Okay, real quick, Carl.
So essentially, let's talk about reverb and chorus and delay. So back in the old days, before we had digital effects, a plate reverb or a spring reverb was mono. That's the only way you're going to get mono. That's the way you're going to do it. If you want to do a stereo mix that has a mono fold down that's not going to have problems, you're going to have to use those old school techniques, because all the modern techniques are actually done by phase cancellation to create the same kind of effect. That's how they're doing it. And you're going to have problem in phasing, which you go back to mono. Chorus, usually in chorus, you'll actually have one speaker or one track that will be not modulated at all, and the other track will be. And when you play them back through a stereo system, it sounds like chorus in the room. Technically, it's not chorus in the mix. So if you're going to do this and you're going to combine those two tracks together, you're going to get phase cancellation. So chorus requires two speakers, full stop, because that's the whole point of chorus. It's multiple. As far as delay, you can use a bucket brigade delay. So you need an analog bucket brigade delay. This will do it as well, because the only problem with some delays, digital delays, is they also use a stereo trick to make the delay sound wider. A bucket brigade delay is a mono, and it will always work in mono.
All right, next question, Bill.
Frank Hilger said, how did the frame rate 2997 come about?
Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, and the easiest thing to do is look it up on the internet. It had to do with 60 cycle power and the frequency of frame rate, the amount of broadcast bandwidth that was available in the early days of TV. It's very technical, and there's tons of YouTube videos that explain it far better than we could in a minute.
It had to do with compatibility of broadcast in black and white. Go ahead, Stuart.
Actually, it's math. Okay. Inside an analog TV, there's a small device called a piezoelectric circuit. You put charge into it, it vibrates. There is a set frequency it vibrates as. Now, when you want to display a number of lines of pictures and you're using that piezoelectric device as your master clock in your TV, there is only a set number of values you can generate in the math available in a analog TV circuit. So if you're going 48 lines, 2997 is one of the frequencies you can scan at.
Okay. I would lock the questions because I think we have more than enough to finish us out with the question, but I don't know how to do that, Bill. So maybe you can and answer the next question or ask the next question.
Okay. Sorry about the lawnmower. Glenn Mead in Waterloo, Ontario, Canada said, I would like to get set up for streaming from home, digital first events. Any recommendations for hardware, lighting, microphone, camera, and so forth?
Okay, Jason.
Join Discord. We have a lot of very quick, show my kit lists. We don't have time to cover that at this point.
And how do we do that, Jason? How do we join?
Well, we have to be here before, 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock Pacific Standard Time, and we get a specific link that only works for a few minutes.
6:40, yes. Go ahead, Carl.
And also coming up later this week, if it's still on the books or in the next week or so, we'll be behind the scenes from the panelists. So you actually get to see our physical setups as we show them off.
Okay, speed round. Next question, Bill.
Ted Claudio, Quezon City, Philippines. Ted asks, any recommendations for portable monitors, at least 15 inches, to use as a multi-view monitor for the ATEM Extreme ISO that's easy to set up and ship?
Carl.
So Blackmagic's own 15.4-inch rack-mounted monitor would be a good one.
It's $1,000, but it's great. The problem is it's SDI. That's going to be tricky.
You'd have to add another $45 for the HDMI to SDI converter.
Mickey says it depends. Yeah, I would suggest if you want something that can reverse and use into a prompter, eYoYo is a cheap choice. It's a Chinese manufactured monitor. They're for security systems. They're not very high resolution, but they make them in a variety of inputs, mainly HDMI and composite video and component video. Okay, next question.
And eYoYo is really fun to say. Bo Cordell in Charleston, South Carolina says, if you are building a remote kit for SDI to or from SRT conversion, would you go for hardware like the KiloView one rack unit encoder decoders, or would you go for the Dell 3930s with capture cards and do it all in software?
Aaron?
I'll let Guy answer this.
Okay, Guy.
Knowing what Bo does, I'd go with the Makitos or the Matrox and do it in hardware, and that way you're getting so SRT is just a wrapper. So basically you can do HEVC or you can do H.264. And so you're putting a load on a computer when you do it, and some of that software can crash. So I use Wirecast. I use VMix as well as a software encoder, and it works, but I have had some degradation issues. If you can get the same match to both sides, so you get, Makito and Makito by Haivision, that's the golden standard right there. I mean, they wrote SRT, so, but they're also 10 grand a whack. So it's just, what do you want to do with the KiloView stuff? So far in my testing, I have one right here. It's good stuff. It's just that Makito, for what you're doing, I would be at the tippy top for that.
All right, next question.
Alan Davies in Norwich, UK, here the panel says, has anyone used the Touch Portal app as an alternative to the Stream Deck app? And if so, what are their thoughts?
Anyone use the Touch Portal? Bueller? Anyone? Hands? No? All right. Sorry, we're moving along in speed round. Next question.
Carl Marxer in New York is up next. Does anyone know of an iPad or iPhone app to control a Blackmagic Smart Scope Duo 4K?
Carl.
So they only have a Mac and Windows. So it looks like it's only a PC and a Mac variant for this particular device from Blackmagic.
So maybe no Android or iOS. Jason?
Not Android or iOS, but you can always just load up. I'm blanking on it, of course. The Raspberry Pi that is under my desk is running it. Companion will absolutely control one of these, and that'll allow you to do everything you need.
All right. Next question, Bill.
Paul Terpstra in Janesville, Wisconsin. What's a good fixed no pan tilt camera that can be used with a PC and VMix over hardwired Ethernet? We have a pan tilt zoom camera, but we'd like to add more points of view at the lowest cost possible.
Stuart.
Okay, lowest cost possible. Hikvision OEM branded security cameras, and you can replace the lens to be a different M12 lens if you want. Bird Dog do a fixed camera that would also work really well and would probably be a better choice, but it will be more expensive. And there's also, like if you've got too much budget, there's the AJA RovoCam, but I wouldn't, and I'm an AJA fan.
Okay, running out of time, Carl. Quickly.
Marshall. Take a look at Marshall. Just go to B&H. Take a look at Marshall and what they've got for their Ethernet.
All right, next question, Bill.
Ted Claudio, Quezon City, Philippines. Any recommended workflow setup for audio talkback systems in Zoom video conferences without using another software so that panelists will only be using Zoom and not other software? I use ATEM Extreme ISO and Zoom Live Track L8.
Aaron?
You can't do that. Sorry. Oh, but other people think you can.
You can do that. You can use the translation system. So you can rename one of the languages, call it talkback, and then you can assign somebody to talk on that channel, and somebody else can pick it up and listen. Well, everybody can. That's the only downside, is that anybody can pull down the drop down and listen to that. So you might want to name it something like, I don't know, some language that doesn't make any sense, or assign somebody Korean and then just pick it up. Yep.
Great. Mickey?
Yeah, I definitely would try to avoid using the language solution if your audience will be in the same Zoom meeting or Zoom event. If you have the budget for point-to-points, the way 090 does it is they create their own mix minuses along with the comms within the same transport that goes to each individual panelist.
And Rupert?
If you're in a paid account and you have access to that, you could maybe enable the ability to join multiple meetings simultaneously and have one meeting for your production and another meeting for your comms, but it's risky.
All right, let's see if we make it. Bill.
Hazmik Gajjar in Cape Town, asking the question differently, wanting to record in ProRes and checking it is set that way. What gives if the 6K is recording in BRAW?
Jason.
You can't record 6K in ProRes. It's that simple. It's not supported on the Blackmagic Pro.
Carl?
Yeah, so I'll send you the actual page from the manual that actually says what resolution support for ProRes and what resolution support BRAW.
All right.
Frank Hilgers in Naperville says, when in 4K mode, the Canon EOS 250D seems to time out after some time. Is this an overheating issue?
Carl?
No, it's a European law issue that's still around. So it's a tax law issue. So 2959, I believe it still is. So in that's kind of the way it is. Generally in 4K, those cameras it'll give you a heat warning. It'll actually tell you and that'll be on the back of the screen, heat warning, and it'll lock you out for a while, like the.
We might be going
5
away,
does.
so you might need to ask the rest of the questions tomorrow. So make sure to scrape them for yourself and hang on to them.
True.
There are no more
Done.
questions.
Nice job, Courtney. You made it.
So we made it just under the wire, and we're probably going to be going into after hours as soon as Alex logs in and takes care of things. So I'd like to thank all the panelists for participating today and all of our producers out there for submitting questions. And we'll see you tomorrow on the Office of Hours.
This is where we need the play out music.
And whoever
As soon
has
as it's
host is
on.
going to have to end the
Stopping